Have you ever wondered how a band that sounded so calm and harmonious on record could be tangled in some of rock music's most explosive conflicts? The Eagles weren't just one of the best-selling American bands of all time. They were also a group of unstoppable egos, endless power struggles, and behind-the-scenes drama that could put any soap opera to shame. Their legacy is more than just chart-topping hits and perfect harmonies. It's a spectacular story of ambition, betrayal, and reconciliation that no one saw coming. If you think you know the Eagles from their mellow California sound, think again. We're about to uncover how a group of musical geniuses managed to turn their own chaos into timeless art. When the Eagles first came together in 1971, they appeared to be just four guys united by a shared love of country-infused rock. Don Henley, Glenn Frey, Bernie Leadon, and Randy Meisner had chemistry from day one, especially when it came to vocal harmonies. Their music gave off a carefree California vibe. Imagine the sunlit horizon, palm trees swaying, and laid-back melodies echoing through a hazy summer afternoon. But that outward harmony masked tension simmering below the surface. Even before they broke into the mainstream, each member had a distinct vision for where the band should go. In a perfect world, all these visions would have merged seamlessly. In reality, the Eagles were destined to clash. Some wanted to keep a foot firmly in country roots. Others craved a louder, more hard-rocking style. From the start, ambition hovered around them like a storm waiting to break. Those early days, though, felt almost magical. They had no trouble at all writing catchy tunes that stuck in your head. Songs like Take It Easy captured a breezy spirit that resonated with millions, introducing the world to the Eagles' unmistakable sound. But while the music brought them swift attention, it also introduced relentless pressure. Suddenly, four friends with star potential had a business empire to build, and that was exactly where the seeds of control and rivalry would sprout. Instead of letting each personality shine equally, the band gravitated toward two strong-willed figures, Glenn Frey and Don Henley. It wasn't long before they emerged as the group's primary driving force. For a short while, everyone else seemed okay with it. Yet the dynamic of two leaders and two followers would prove combustible. Like a perfectly tuned engine that's missing a crucial part, the Eagles' sense of unity was already misaligned. The cracks were faint at first, but they were there. Glenn Frey and Don Henley didn't just want the Eagles to succeed, they demanded it. To them, being in a band wasn't about friendly collaboration. It was a mission to conquer the charts and become rock royalty, no matter the cost. Glenn Frey, in particular, had a fiery drive. He openly declared, "This is not a democracy," positioning himself as the band's architect and undisputed visionary. Don Henley, quieter but just as unwavering, stood firmly by his side. Together, they co-wrote hit songs that turned the Eagles into global superstars. From Desperado to One of These Nights, their partnership generated the kind of sweeping cinematic tracks that dominate radio waves for decades. This success only reinforced their positions at the top of the Eagles' hierarchy. If Frey was the spark of the band's ambition, Henley acted as the measured strategist, ensuring every track was polished and every business move carefully planned. Behind closed doors, though, tensions simmered. Bernie Leadon, a country purist, saw Frey's relentless push toward rock stardom as overshadowing the band's original, more rustic flavor. Randy Meisner, a vocal talent with an angelic falsetto, found himself overshadowed by Frey and Henley's big personalities. The more the Eagles soared, the more friction grew between leaders and followers. It didn't help that in the mid-1970s, Los Angeles was a playground for wild substance habits, late-night parties, and cutthroat competition. It was an era when bands lived under a scorching spotlight, never sure who might betray them or how the world might judge their next move. Frey and Henley wanted everything: chart-topping singles, perfect live shows, and total command over the group's direction. In their eyes, the end justified the means. If that meant pushing other members to their breaking points, so be it. Bernie Leadon was a skilled guitarist whose country background gave the Eagles their earliest folk rock twist. While Frey was busy dreaming up chart-raising anthems, Leadon longed to keep a piece of that down-home authenticity. For a while, their differences looked like a creative asset, one that made the band sound refreshing and nuanced. But in reality, this was a powder keg waiting to ignite. As the Eagles' fame soared, the tension between Frey's arena rock ambitions and Leadon's country sensibilities grew. Frey saw a future of sold-out stadiums, more electric guitars, and bigger, louder production. Leadon preferred a warmer, acoustic vibe that let the band's harmonies and lyrical stories shine. Each rehearsal felt like a tug of war, and each new track was a battlefield where creative preferences collided. The real meltdown came when the endless cycle of tours and recording sessions began to erode Leadon's patience. He felt the band was losing its soul, tilting more toward commercial success success than the raw, honest music he loved. One day, after a heated discussion, Bernie Leadon marched up to Glenn Frey and poured a beer right on his head, a famous act of defiance in the Eagles saga. It was his not-so-subtle way of saying, "You need to chill out." Nothing would ever be the same after that. Frey, furious at the public humiliation, viewed Leadon's stunt as the final nail in the coffin. The band replaced him with the more rock-oriented Joe Walsh, signaling a new era that steered the Eagles further away from their country rock roots. Leadon's departure became the first major crack in the band's perfect facade. Randy Meisner had a voice that could pierce the sky. His soaring falsetto on hits like "Take It to the Limit" gave the Eagles some of their most memorable moments. Underneath that vocal brilliance, though, Meisner was shy, introverted, and intensely uncomfortable with confrontation. He didn't crave the spotlight. In fact, it often terrified him. At first, the mismatch between Meisner's timid nature and Frey's iron-fisted leadership stayed manageable. Yet as "Take It to the Limit" became a crowd favorite, Glenn Frey insisted it be performed at every show. Frey's viewpoint was simple. If fans came to hear that spine-tingling high note, Meisner was obligated to deliver, even when he felt too exhausted to hit it. Meisner's anxiety spiked each time he had to belt out that final note in front of massive audiences. The stress became suffocating. The break finally came during the Eagles' Hotel California tour in 1977. One night, Randy Meisner refused to sing "Take It to the Limit," citing sheer fatigue and the fear of vocal disaster. Glenn Frey saw this as betrayal. A backstage shouting match exploded, with Frey essentially telling Meisner that if he couldn't keep up, he should get out. Deeply hurt and resentful, Meisner left soon after. This departure struck a bittersweet chord. Meisner had been there from the very start, crafting some of the band's most evocative harmonies and songwriting contributions. But his gentle nature didn't mesh with the Eagles' ceaseless push for perfection. For him, walking away was the only escape from the mounting pressures and never-ending demands. Don Felder joined the Eagles in 1974, bringing a more rock-centric edge and the remarkable guitar work that would help shape the band's iconic album, Hotel California. His contributions included one of the most famous riffs in rock history, the haunting intro to the album's title track. It was a turning point that allowed the Eagles to transition seamlessly from country rock to a more hard-hitting, globally appealing sound. Beneath the success, though, Felder struggled with Glenn Frey and Don Henley's power dynamic. While he admired their songwriting chops and recognized their status, he bristled at what he saw as micromanagement. One of the earliest insults came when Felder recorded vocals for "Victim of Love." Unbeknownst to him, Frey and Henley snuck into the studio later and recorded Henley's voice over Felder's. He was appalled, but kept it inside, an emotional wound that festered for years. The powder keg finally blew during a benefit concert for a politician, where Felder, feeling slighted, made a sarcastic remark under his breath. "You're welcome, Senator, I guess." Glenn Frey heard it and exploded in anger. The tension seethed on stage as they performed "Best of My Love," both men smiling for the audience while privately imagining tearing each other to shreds. By the end of the night, instruments were smashed, insults flew, and the Eagles were all but finished. In 1980, they officially broke up under circumstances that could only be described as catastrophic. When the Eagles dissolved in 1980, it wasn't a graceful goodbye. It was a meltdown that left behind smoldering resentments and shattered friendships. They had soared to the pinnacle of musical stardom, only to crack under the weight of their own expectations and power struggles. Lawsuits started flying almost immediately as old bandmates fought over royalties, songwriting credits, and every other detail that might prove profitable. It seemed like the Eagles were buried for good, their polished harmonies a distant echo of what once was. But, as the saying goes, never say never. In 1994, the unthinkable happened. The Eagles came back together for the Hell Freezes Over tour and album, referencing a long-standing joke that they'd only reunite when the underworld turned frosty. Fans greeted their return with unbridled enthusiasm. Old wounds were pushed aside, at least publicly, and the band once again took the stage, reminding everyone why their music had become the soundtrack of an era. They updated their greatest hits, performed new songs, and reintroduced the world to that legendary synergy. Yet even this reunion was fraught with behind-the-scenes turmoil, especially around finances. Don Felder felt he wasn't getting a fair share, while Frey and Henley believed they deserved a bigger cut due to their central roles and name recognition. The tension festered until Felder was finally fired in 2001, igniting a fresh round of legal battles that laid bare the band's deeply rooted conflicts. In 2016, fans around the world mourned mourned the loss of Glenn Frey. A powerful voice, a dynamic on-stage presence, and a fierce visionary, Frey had been the Eagles' most driving force. Many assumed that his death marked the definitive end of the band. After all, how could they continue without the man who, alongside Henley, had shaped their very identity? But once again, the Eagles surprised everyone. Determined to honor Glenn Frey's memory, the band invited his son, Deacon Frey, to fill his father's place. In doing so, the Eagles added a bittersweet twist to their legacy. Joe Walsh, Timothy B. Schmidt, and Don Henley remained, forging ahead with Deacon Frey stepping into an almost unimaginable role. Concerts took on a reflective tone. Fans still heard the classics, but now, with the reminder of how time had changed the band's lineup, it was both a tribute and a statement of resilience. The Eagles continued performing, and audiences kept coming. The age of music streaming introduced their hits to a new generation. Songs like Hotel California and Take It Easy still resonate, testaments to timeless songwriting and meticulously crafted arrangements. Even with the heartbreak of losing Glenn Frey, the band's legacy stayed stronger than ever. Looking back, it's astonishing that a group of musicians who sang in near-perfect harmony could be so divided behind the scenes. Yet, for the Eagles, creative tension was part of their formula, even when it pushed them to the breaking point. They gave us anthems that defined an era, then fought with each other as if they were sworn enemies. In the end, their music transcended the turmoil, leaving a legacy that refuses to fade. Their story is a reminder that sometimes the greatest art emerges from the most volatile conditions. Could the Eagles have achieved such sweeping success without that fierce competition, those relentless demands for perfection, and the personal sacrifices that strained every relationship? We'll never know. But one thing is certain. From Bernie Leadon's unceremonious beer-pouring exit to Don Felder's legal battles and beyond, they showed us that genius often comes at a cost. For all the feuds, heartbreak, and shattered guitars, the Eagles remain one of the most influential rock bands ever to grace a stage. Their music proved that harmony can exist even in the midst of chaos, and that sometimes the biggest storms leave behind the brightest legacies. So the next time you hear Life in the Fast Lane or Take It to the Limit, remember, you're not just listening to a radio staple, but to the results of unbridled ambition, bitter conflict, and sheer unstoppable talent. And that, perhaps, is what makes their story so timeless. The Eagles continue to soar, if only because their songs refuse to crash to the ground. After everything they've endured, broken friendships, massive success, lawsuits, and even loss, their music stands as a monument to both their brilliance and their undeniable resilience.